Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Glenn McGowan. This is LCOBMW. Today is the official kickoff to my manual swap series on my 73 Corvette. I officially have this thing jacked up and ready to go for this swap. I have everything here that I need to do the swap, and this is going to be a step-by-step type of series. So if you're going to change your car from auto to manual, whether it's a 4, 5, or 6-speed, this will pretty much cover all bases. The only thing I didn't get here was a drive shaft, because I should be able to use the one in my car. It's a turbo 400, and I'm putting a Muncie 4-speed in it, so that should be fine. So the only thing I won't go over is whether or not what drive shaft you need if you have a 5 or a 6-speed that you're swapping over. But besides that, clutch pedal assembly, installation, I got a clutch, flywheel, trans, bell housing, shifter, all that good stuff to convert this thing from the 400 over to a 4-speed. So first things first, I'm gonna have to disconnect the battery, do a couple little things before we drop the trans out, and we're also gonna go over everything that I got so you can take a look at what you're gonna need for the swap. So let's get into it. So we just dropped our new clothing line. Everything's available at LCOBMW.com. Some of our new designs are Save the Sticks. We also have, it's not just the car, it's Corvette. And then on the back, we have our new logo. And on the right side sleeve of the hooded sweatshirts, we have our signature spark plug. We do have all these designs available in t-shirts and sweatshirts. We also have E36, E46, and also our basic, which just has logo on the chest, and then our spark plug on the sleeve. So check out all our products and our merch at LCOBMW.com. Okay, so first things first, so you're gonna need a bell housing. Now, I'm actually gonna be using the one that was off my C4 that had the 4+3 in there. Even though it had a Bolden style hydraulic slave cylinder, it should still be the same when I'm running this manual linkage setup. So I will be using that, and that's a freebie right there. As far as my trans is concerned, it's right here. This has a 10 spline input shaft. So if you're going a 4-speed route, when you select the clutch, just make sure whatever clutch you use, that it has the same splines with your transmission, because depending on which year you got the trans from, it's going to have a different spline. Now this is a 10, so I think what trans is in a 73 4-speed is, I'm not even sure what it is, but I don't think it's a Muncie. So the clutch for a 73 Corvette is completely different for the trans that I got. So I got a clutch and a flywheel. The diameters match the size, so I ended up going with just like a factory style clutch and flywheel, mainly because this isn't going to be like a race car or anything, and they're fairly inexpensive. You can get, you know, a pretty good performance clutch for a couple $100 depending on your application. For me, this will do the trick for the amount of driving that I do on the car. So transmission here, and I ended up buying a Hurst shifter used on Marketplace with all like the linkage, and here it is here. Now this is like an early one, so the one that I have in my 69 vet actually is short here and has 2 bolts through it, and you actually bolt the straight stick to it, where this is like welded in all in one piece here. So that's not going to fly for me, so I am going to modify that. So I bought a 6-inch shifter. This is actually for a T56 6-speed that I got off of like Sicky or something like that. They have like 6-inch or 8-inch, which I'm going to modify this. I'm going to cut this and make this, and even probably thread these so this actually bolts to this, because I wanted like a short straight stick anyway, so it kind of be more of a custom application. But we'll work on this when I do the linkage setup and all that. I also got this Hurst pit pack. It is metal like washers that go in between the linkage here and the brackets on the trans. They're normally I do like plastic or nylon or something. These are, you know, metal, so there's no like slop in there. It's more like a race car feel, which I like. So I got that for this here. A couple things you're gonna need too. You're gonna need gear oil, whatever gear oil you need that matches that transmission. So do your research. Clutch, flywheel, like I said, and the other thing, probably like the biggest thing that you're going to need to get, besides spending the money on whatever trans you want to go with, is the clutch pedal assembly. Now, the company is, I believe it's Silver Sport Transmissions. Now, you can get this from Summit Racing or Jags. I bought mine from Jags. They were running some sort of sale, but it's roughly $500. Mine was like $460 or something. It was a percentage off, but you're looking around $500 for that. But which is really cool is that it has everything and all the instructions for it, like the bar, the pedals, you know, every little washer and spring, the clutch fork, all that good stuff. It gives you a parts list of everything you need. I'm gonna zoom in here. So if that's not confusing, I don't know what is, but we'll tackle this together. And then there's just this bag, this most intimidating bag of like 100 little small springs and pieces and stuff like that. But we'll lay all that out. We'll take our time with it and make sure we put this in correctly when we do it. But this is kind of like a game changer. Like you could source a set of pedals out of another car. Like you have a donor car that has everything there, then you can kind of pull everything off. But I mean, for the price, realistically, for like under 500 bucks, it was free shipping. Everything's brand new, like even the rubber pads and stuff for the pedals. So it's just a really nice, easy kit to get to make your life that much easier. So to me, it was kind of a no-brainer. So these are all the parts that I need to put this thing back together. So besides that, I think that covers everything that you'll need to swap over your trans. Now, if you're having like a 5-speed or 6-speed, you know, you're gonna have to run a different trans mount. I believe I can run my factory trans mount because these cars came with a 4-speed. I don't know what that looks like yet, but we'll get to that as well. But there'll be little things like that when you're doing a 5 or 6-speed. But there's plenty of information out there with people doing resto mods with those drivetrains in it. But all in all, this is more of like a factory style swap. So yeah, so let's just get into the car and start taking this stuff out. Okay, so I just got done disconnecting the battery. You are going to be right by the starter and probably have to drop the starter down. So obviously you don't want that thing arcing and sparking everywhere. So it's just, whenever you're doing a big project, you should just disconnect the battery to be safe. Another couple little things too, to disconnect the trans. Now, I am going to show you one thing here that I noticed. I have an Excel coil on top of my distributor. And it looks like if once I drop the trans cross member, it's going to sag down, and it looks like that's going to hit against the wiper motor there and possibly break it. So I'm going to take that off. I might just unbolt the distributor cap if there's enough clearance, just so that doesn't fall back and smack, or just even sit on that with all the weight of the engine on there. You don't want that. Just to be safe, it's a weird thing, but I figured I'll address that. It takes 2 minutes to take that off. Another thing is that you have the transmission cooler lines going from the trans all the way up to the radiator. So you're gonna have to disconnect those two. You can disconnect them from the side of the radiator and from the trans and then pull them through, or just freaking cut them and pull them out that way. That's what I'm gonna do, because that's how I roll. I'm not gonna reuse them or anything. And I think at one point I ended up like having a leak and having to splice them. So that'll probably be the fastest route. And you can actually just leave your trans cooler. You could like plug them or cap the holes, but once all the fluid's out of there, you'll be good. It's not like there's coolant or anything that's going to come out of there, so you can just leave that open on the radiator. So let's take a quick peek. So this is what I'm talking about here. This is like super close. So once I take this off, because this thing's going to fall back a little bit, especially with the weight of the trans on there, so I just don't want any problems there. And then I believe the trans lines are down here, like there's one there, I believe. And then the other one's kind of on the bottom, so they got to come out. And they run, I don't know exactly where they run, but they run underneath there, back to the trans, to sum that up. So I'm just going to do that real quick, and then we'll get underneath this thing. So underneath the car, we're going to do a quick overview of what has to come out. Starting from the front, there's the starter. There are the lines right there that have to come out as well. And then we're going to take off this shield here, because we got to unbolt the torque converter from the flex plate. And then this is your shifter selector linkage. This has to come off, needs to be disconnected. We're going to take that out from the inside too, but we'll wait a little bit on that. This is the trans cross member that has to come out, and you're going to need to unbolt it there. This is the back of the trans where the drive shaft is there. And then that goes back there. And in order to access that, I think it's easier just to take this support bracket off to get to those. If not, we can try to sneak behind and unbolt the drive shaft there. So that's just kind of what you're looking at here. But I'm going to start just tearing in, taking stuff off, and I'll show you as I get everything out. So I removed the access cover here. There's just 4 7/16 head bolts holding that on. And now I'm going to get to the torque converter bolts here. So these are 9/16. And one thing I'm going to do, since I'm under here by myself, you can either put a socket on the end of the crankshaft and rotate it that way. If not, I have like a small pry bar here. I'm just going to slowly rotate this thing around here so I can get to the bolt with my socket. And once I can get a straight shot on here like this, I'll just get these out. And there's, I think, 3 of these on here. You can turn it by hand a little bit there. So once you get all of these out, you want to just push the torque converter back a little bit so it kind of seats better in the pump, just so it doesn't fall out when you're sliding it off the engine. I'm just moving this by hand, mainly because I'm so strong. Okay, once I get this done, I'm going to take the starter out. I'm just going to unbolt it and use like a bungee cord just to kind of hold it up and out of the way so it's just not hanging on the wires. And they're 9/16 bolts on the starter too. So now I'm going to disconnect the selector cable off the side. Now there's a bracket here, and then there's another one here with that's being held in by the transmission pans. That's being held in by the transmission pan bolts. So I'm going to take these 4 out, but first I'm going to pull this clip out, this cotter pin here, like that. Get that washer off there. And I'll keep the bracket with that. Now back here is the speedo gear. I'm going to disconnect that too. And there's another connector on the side here. We'll pull that out to get better access to it. That's out. That bracket just comes out, put that aside, and there's a cables free. Same thing here. I'm actually going to take this selector off here, the 9/16, because there is a clip on the other side, but it's just faster to take it off there. And you can see there's the cotter pin there. I am going to pull this out and put the selector back on the trans, with the selector bracket back on the trans. So now I'm working on taking off the transmission cross member. So there is 2 9/16 bolts here, and then there is another 9/16 bolt that goes through this way, and the nut is on this end. And it's the same on the other side. Once you get the sides unbolted, right up here is the actual main mount. There's 2 5/8 head bolts right in here. I'm also going to put a jack stand underneath the transmission pan with like a block of wood. So when I remove this, the whole thing won't sag down. So I got the transmission cross member out already. As you can see, the jack stand's holding the trans up, and The only thing that's kind of gonna get you hung up here is this little wheel here for the e-brake cable. This bolt needs to come out, and you should probably take this off before you drop the cross member. Now my e-brake is disconnected because I have a hydraulic handbrake in there, but if you just undo this, which is 3/4, this nut here and this bolt, it will take this wheel off of here and keep the cable up in the car so you don't have to deal with this. But I'm gonna be taking this cable out anyway since I don't use it. So that's what that looks like there. So the next step is to get to the drive shaft here. I'm gonna unbolt it in the front and the rear, and they are 7/16 bolts holding these in, two here, and the same on the back. So as I'm loosening these here, you can only access like 2 here. So what I do is I just reach up in front of the trans where the selector is, and I click it back to neutral, turn the drive shaft, put it back in park, and then you can loosen the other side. It's a quick way to do it. Or you could wedge like a screwdriver up in here like that, and it just helps hold it in place as you're breaking these loose if you keep it neutral while you're doing it. So I'm working on the back bolts of the drive shaft, and I have an extension on my ratchet here, and I go all the way over to right there. Try the easiest way to get to it. Instead of taking this piece down here, I'm just coming up here like this and breaking them loose, taking them out, and then rotating the drive shaft. So the drive shaft unbolted, what I ended up doing was taking some masking tape and wrapping around the U-joint, because if you are reusing your U-joint, these caps can pop off and the needle bearings go everywhere. So I'm gonna do the same thing in the back. I'm just gonna put a flat head back there and pop that out and pull the whole thing forward here like that, just to get it out of here. At that point, I'm going to lower this down and work on the bell housing bolts. Okay, now for the fun part. So I'm gonna get all the bell housing bolts off, and I have a really long extension here with a swivel and a shallow 9/16 socket. So I'm just gonna go around and take them, mainly all the top ones off first. I'm gonna leave probably like this one in here last, just so I can get like a jack or something underneath the trans, then take this off and pull the trans off onto the jack. So I got most of the bolts out. There's this one here, I'm on the passenger side, and the other one on the driver's side are really close, and they're a funny angle with the way the shape of the floor is, that I actually had to go in here with an open end wrench and just slowly walk these out, because there's no way I can get in here with a swivel and a socket. So that's just a little tip. So I have all the bolts out now, and I just pried it with the pry bar off of the back of the engine, and it's sitting here on this sketchy jack with sketchy pieces of wood here, but it beats it falling on your face. So now I'm just gonna lower the jack down. I do still have the lines hooked up on the side, which I'm gonna disconnect once it's lowered and on the ground, just to keep the mess down to a minimum here. And I did take the dipstick tube off the top, just pulled it out, the dipstick itself, not the tube, but the tube is still actually on the transmission, but it clears fine. Okay, now it's actually sitting on the floor, and you can see there's the lines there, and you can just disconnect them if you want right from the side. Then I'm going to take off the flex plate there. Now I'm taking off the flex plate here. All these bolts are 11/16, and just a little reminder too, when you do get your new clutch kit, it does come with the pilot bearing that you have to put in the back of the crankshaft here. So just don't forget that before you go back together with it. Okay, so the trans is out, flex plate's off. Now, if you are keeping the original engine in your car, you're not having any current plans of changing that, replace a rear main seal at this time, because it's kind of stupid to do all this work and the rear main seal's right there. So you can go ahead and do that. I have another engine that I'm building for this down the line here, so I'm not really gonna bother with this. It's not leaking that bad anyway. Another couple little things too. I pulled the vacuum line, the hard pipe that goes down to the transmission out. I still have to get the cooler lines off the front of the car, which I'll get to in a little bit, but right now I'm going to go in and start disconnecting the actual automatic transmission shifter selector. So we'll look at that right now and get that stuff out, and that'll be it as far as removing everything off the car before we go back together with the new stuff. So the console's already removed. I didn't have an original one in here originally, so it makes it easier for me, but you're gonna have to take all that out anyway. So there is a series of 5/16 screws holding all this stuff in, and then there's even this underneath the insulation here. There's another 2, and it's a part of the selector cable that goes through the floor. Then there's a little clip here to remove the cable from the actual shifter itself, and then there are some wire connectors here that go to like the neutral safety switch for the selector here. So I'm just going to start taking everything off. Okay, so I got the shifter out, and there's just a couple little things that just kind of popped into my head. So this piece, I ended up putting the screws back in here, and I'm just pushing the cable down through the bottom of the floor, like that, bye-bye. Mainly because you need to kind of have this blocked off, because the 4-speed car wouldn't have this here, I don't think, so that needs to be kind of like blocked off from anything outside. Now the boot here, I took all the screws off of that, so I'm going to pop that out. Now there is like a boot that goes here for the 4-speed cars. I had to just kind of look into it a little bit. Now this is also the selector. I took it off the side of the transmission. This has like the, once it's in park, like if you take it out of park, it won't start unless it's in neutral, like a neutral safety switch. Now, I have it set in park. I'm gonna do some research and try to figure out what we have to do to bypass this so you can make the clutch pedal be the neutral safety switch. So I'll do some research, but for right now, I'm just gonna leave that like it's in park, just sitting here for now. Okay, now I got everything out of the car, so there's a couple things I realized I needed to get. I needed to get a yoke for the back of the transmission, so I'm going to order that. I found one online for a Muncie and a Corvette, so I'm going to order that, wait for that. I also am going to order 2 new U-joints. I'm pretty sure they're probably the original ones that were in the car on that drive shaft, so I'm not trying to put that back with those old U-joints in there. I'm also going to take the time now to clean up the bell housing, the trans cross member, and the drive shaft. I'm going to paint everything, make everything kind of nice before I put it back in. I think my next approach is I'm going to tackle the pedal assembly. I feel like that's probably the most complicated part. So that's what we'll probably get to next to the second part of this series, is to get all that squared away before I put everything back, which is pretty easy to do at this point. So besides that, I'm gonna work on cleaning this stuff up, painting it, making it pretty. So if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. Thanks for watching.